Thanks for having us, everyone. My name's Stephen Mount. I'm the son of Dennis Mount, who was EEL number 276, and I'm joined by Mum tonight, Robin, who is very good at organising things and putting me up with things. So thanks for the flick pass. But no, I'm happy to do this because I've been around football all my life, and just to probably put a bit of background around some of the things I'll say tonight. I've been lucky to have diverse careers in a few areas, television as a reporter and presenter in regional TV mainly, with the Newcastle Knights in the National Rugby League as a media manager in medical research in a management position, and also now as I'm a lawyer now by trade. So I've been very fortunate to have wide and varying experiences that have exposed me to many aspects of this CTE journey and created some great contacts, and I hope some of the thoughts tonight and experiences and observations may be able to put a different slant on some conversations or even expand as we move forward. But I'm here tonight to talk primarily about Dennis Mount, who used to be known as the goal-kicking front rower from Warialda. He grew up in Gravesend, a few minutes up the road in between Warialda and Warrie. Started football at the Armidale School, boarding school in Armidale, with rugby around 59 and 60, before going back home to Warialda to Group 5, where he became the highest point scorer in that part of the world. Representative positions followed in Group 5 and Northern Division. Selected for country firsts around 1972 at New Zealand, led to further selections in city and country games. The SCG had held a special memory for him. He had his nose spread from one side of his face to the other by Big Artie Beats in one of his first games at the cricket ground. From those sides, Parramatta contracted the likes of Graham Lai, Terry Skirfield and Laurie Wakefield, names that might be familiar to some in the room. Dad had options to go to St George and North Sydney, where Noel Kelly threw everything at him, but Parramatta was where his loyalties lied, and he signed here. Like all players of that era, during his Sydney stint, there were full-time jobs. Through the week, he worked at the Shell refinery, trained several nights a week, probably drank after training, played on the weekends, and then back, rinse and repeat, first thing Monday, off we go again. No rehab, just straight into it. Dennis played 60-odd first-grade games, got injured in the final year of his contract and left Sydney, and then went on the captain coaching circuit in country rugby league with some considerable success. The first I realised the significance of his career was a young sports reporter in regional TV. We were covering a junior rugby league tournament, and Noel Quill was a scout, I think maybe even for Parramatta back at that stage, or Canterbury, Manly, maybe Manly, doesn't matter. I met Crush. He did, yeah, well, he did all three. I just couldn't remember where it was that day, but ended up sitting next to Noel just by chance, and I knew he was a schoolmate of my uncle. We went through the usual Warialda stories because my grandfather was a publican and fell off the first floor of the pub drunk one night and got through all that. Then Crush said, "Oh, so you'd have to be Dennis and Robin's son." Well, he was my hero. He paved the way for a generation of bush footballers to come from Warialda and those areas. He dropped Stan's name, and I thought, oh, we're onto something here. He obviously did have a fair football career. So that's the football side of him. Life after football was a transport business with the beer and general freight truck, as he was finishing up playing, if we like to call it the football wind-down period. Throughout that time, he started suffering debilitating migraines. Would often require medical intervention with doctor visits at 2 and 3 a.m. in the morning. Doc Everett had needed him up. That'd get him going about 3 hours later to climb in the truck and get down to Tooheys Brewery. The frequent headaches eventually eased, but migraine and depression, mood swings, looking back, plagued his life. We didn't really get on as a kid. I was a naughty boy, most likely because the signs and symptoms were there, but no one really detected it. I'd often say that being such a cranky bastard. But I annoyed him because I was a shit of a kid with a sense of justice, so it's probably not a great mix under the same roof as someone with emerging signs of CTE. But looking back, the signs were there. He had great mates, but slowly withdrew from everyone. He was incredibly moody, had a lack of tact when annoyed by the smallest of things people would say in a group situation, and increasingly unable to be in a crowd. He slowly lost interest in just about everything, even pet dogs. All our lives he was the ultimate dog whisperer, but just lost interest. And for someone with such a strong community ethical standards, who stepped up and offered his time willingly across all fields, surf club, football club, whatever needed doing, something just wasn't quite right as he withdrew. But it was probably well hidden, because he then went into an adaptation of his life where he started making lists, so it sort of masked the memory side of things. The red flags were starting to appear earlier, we thought, but it became obvious, as Mum writes, around 2018, with a daily short-term memory decline, worse in around 2019, and most obvious after a delayed diagnosis through the Sports Concussion Clinic in 2020. That's a clinic up in Newcastle, a different study to Rowena's. And there was confusion if that was the reason, because that was after sort of 48 bouts of rate treatment for recurring prostate cancer. In January this year, it became too much. He moved into an aged care facility, and it's become obvious from this experience that the system is dramatically underprepared for the wave of sporting-related CTE cases on the horizon. Rowena's speech really ran home some of the symptoms looking back. Dad's symptoms were depression, mood swings, chronic short-term memory loss, eventually most long-term memory recall, dependency and fear of being left alone, unable to carry out daily functions, eventually leading to the inability to dress, shower, toilet, and to make choices. A lack of empathy and concentration, a lack of organising skills and motivation, resistance to personal care, and no sleep, roaming around all night and day. One observation from this experience is, and this is anecdotal, it's only our experience, but when this form of dementia leads to full-time care, it doesn't seem to be a quick ending. It's the start of years of suffering for victims and their families. And aged care in its current form is not necessarily a good fit for him, because he doesn't fit the bill, but there's just no other option at the moment. With Dad, experienced staff have commented on the strong similarity to sportsmen they've seen in other facilities. They've got specific traits, repetitive habits, resistance and strength. They're very strong, and especially when they're backed into a corner, when they're being clothed and things like that. But from this point on, the names change, but the story just seems to slightly vary. Names that come to mind in my circle of friends, former colleagues and acquaintances have striking similarities, and so many of them are similar to the stories we've seen tonight. Just look at Mario, as we all know Mario Fennick, one of the great fellas of the games, that's starting to struggle. Trevor Crow's a guy up our way. A handful of games for St George in the 80s before a great country career. Former Newcastle Rugby League president, Knights board member. He's just past 60 and he's in incredibly intensive aged care. A bloke called Dave Chook Howell. Chookie was rated by Les Boyd as one of the greatest and toughest country footballers he's ever known. But he got dementia early, started in a similar fashion to this, and became an incredibly violent patient. He died at a very young age. Robbie O'Davis is starting to have his struggles. But one question I struggle with, and it maybe the researchers can have some more insight. Why is Mario Fennick showing signs of dementia that Benny Elias is still speaks so well? Why is Steve Mortimer in aged care but Sterlo is so coherent? Same positions, admittedly slightly different playing styles, but such a different outcome in retirement. Are some people more prone to brain trauma than others? But from this point on in the story, it feels like it's just a case of delete Steve Mortimer and add Dennis Mount. If I can indulge in my thoughts about where we're going from here publicly, telling these stories help and raise much needed awareness, but the news cycle comes and goes in such a flash. So the stories create great emotion, but it's so short-lived, and to date much of the focus feels like it's been trying to grow the NRL to support or contribute to the care of ex-players. The stories are often being led by people who are demanding a response from the NRL now. My view, and it's probably a lawyer's view, but it's purely an opinion, is the NRL can't at the moment, and they won't. Firstly, they weren't in the current form they are now when many of the guys in this room started playing, and my father's example. Many of these guys went through the days where you'd play in reserves, you'd get knocked, you'd have the smelling salts, you get up, you go again, then you come back, get on the bench, come back on in first grade and do it all again. Those days may be gone, but while we all know players are bigger, faster, and the game has become a collision sport, it's not until there is undisputed evidence that real change can happen, not only in the NRL, but any sport that increases the risk of brain trauma. The game's worth too much money for stakeholders to roll over and admit fault until they've got no other choice. The government's even behind the expansion of the NRL, as we've seen with Papua New Guinea, even though most of us are scratching our heads about what that's all about. I think we all know, but yeah. The NRL's major focus as well now is centred on concussion protocols, so they can prove that the game with billions of dollars each year can roll out that they have the ultimate duty of care for players. So if they voluntarily get behind this cause or admit fault, the game as we know it will be over, because litigation will be the beginning of the end. Junior registration will cease if mothers or parents, they won't sign their child up knowing that they're only 4 or 5 decades away from being in a room not knowing who their family is or where they are. But if litigation or compensation is the end game, it's not until there is undisputed evidence that victims of CTE-related injuries can be taken seriously and have a case to present. And alternatively, if protecting the next generation is the end game, again, undisputed evidence is the most critical element to make disruptive change. So both of these outcomes start with the real heroes, medical researchers. The same as Hughes is doing for advances in brain cancer research, or Neil Danaher is doing for motor neurone disease. If we get behind the likes of Roy Simmons and raise as much money as we can through efforts like he's doing for dementia research, then Dr. Mobs and the team may one day have a diagnosis for CTE while they're alive, like a definite diagnosis, or who knows, could even lead to some sort of a test for young players that they know at a very early age if they should or shouldn't go anywhere near contact sport. Again, it's my opinion, but I just thought it's worth sharing. For now, we find ourselves in a situation where healthcare decision makers need to be on board. This will also require medical research intervention to improve this side of the CTE journey. So what I'm saying is, all roads, they probably lead to medical research. Our health system is under strain, understaffed, and inexperienced for the wave of incoming cases in future years. This is just so evident where we come from. A local lady serving coffee one day at Hawk's Nest is a dementia nurse at Peter Sinclair Gardens the next. They're so short-staffed, they'll grab anyone. The system is just so overwhelmed. So just as we wind up, while Dennis Mount's situation with CTE dementia won't improve, if his story can help with detecting the symptoms, changing the health system to not only improve his remaining time in care, and for the wave of potential ex-footballers facing this hideous disease or raising awareness for medical research, it may create some comfort for his remaining days and save thousands of families in the future from being faced with what really is the long goodbye. So like all of us, we have an obligation to leave this world a better place for future generations. So hopefully we can continue a coordinated movement to make those suffering now the other heroes in this story, to find a prevention or even better, a cure. Thanks so much for listening, and if there's anything I can do to help with some of my experiences or contacts along the way, please feel free to call. Thank you.